AI is taking off everywhere, like a technology like we've never seen before. But we are seeing various signs of issues with adoption. And I'm joined today with Lee Hicken, AI Technology Lead Asia at Microsoft. And we're going to have an interesting fireside chat, the two of us. And Lee, my first question to you, is it a bubble?
Well, that's a difficult question to start with. And I guess by is it a bubble, do you mean is it going to burst? And I'd have to say that I don't think it's a bubble that's going to burst, but I think it's a fragile environment we're in right now where we're still trying to learn and understand just what are the limitations of this tool we now have in our hands. So in some ways, it's fragile like a bubble, but it isn't a bubble.
So if I take that to the next, progression, what are the big opportunities that are you seeing, from the Microsoft perspective that are happening now in AI in different industries or geographies, et cetera?
I get asked that question a lot, framed in different ways around this idea of, well, what should we be doing with AI? What's the things that it can do for us? And it's a hard question to answer, Gil. And in some ways, I'd say it's a bit like asking, what can I do with a computer? What can I do with a car? What can I do with a calculator? It's such a broadly applicable tool. And I think the first thing we need to think about is that it is a tool that we're going to learn how to leverage and adapt it into our lives. And you think about when we first got mobile phones, and everyone was saying, well, why would I need a phone in my pocket? Why do I need someone to contact me everywhere? And of course, now we couldn't live without that concept of being contactable all the time, but we adapted and we learned. And I think, we're on that journey. But to your point about the actual opportunities, I think what I'm seeing is that at both ends or two extreme ends of the scale, at one end, we've got AI at high scale being applied into science and research and discovery. And we're learning new things, discovering new things, and accelerating the pace of science. And that's a hugely complex end. But then at the other end of it, we sort of have this really simple, basic, but still meaningful, read my email and tell me what is important today, or help me figure out what's going on in my life so I can be a bit more optimized. So I think, when we think about the opportunity, I think for most people, it's going to be in the little things. It's the little things they can do a little bit better and figure out kind of, how to make AI a little bit more a part of their life. I think the interesting space we're going to get to, Gil, is not the either ends of the spectrum, but how do we fill that bit in the middle? Like, how do we significantly change people's lives and their work and their sort of experiences through AI? And I think that's where we're heading, but we're not there yet.
I'm going to add to that a little bit from my personal experience. We've started working with Microsoft about a year and a half ago on Azure OpenAI. And I have the benefit that the R&D sits a few floors below where I'm sitting in the Terra offices. And the first time I went to see them working with it, the experience I got, the feeling I got was that they're working with a person and not software.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the opportunities are very different than a tool, because software, the tool does, what it's built to do. But this has almost, I'd say, a life of its own. And it feels like the opportunities are going to be something we can't even imagine.
I like the analogy of a human. I'm always worried about when we sort of anthropomorphize it and make it feel like that. But it's like it's this ultimate assistant. You're absolutely right.
Exactly, ultimate companion, in a sense. Even because it also has some kind of level of EQ, or high level of EQ, actually. So it's a wave. It's a fragile one. It's not a bubble.
Yes.
I actually agree on that. If you compare it to .com, blockchain, what are the differences there? Because we're seeing different technological waves, but this one feels very different.
I agree, it feels different, and it's hard. And maybe it's a little bit about what you just said, Gil, around this idea that it is a little bit more humanistic or human-like in its interactions with us. It isn't sort of a hard, blunt interface like we typically see from software technologies. It's a kind of a much more malleable interface. I think often we see technology ideas pop up and they're like solutions looking for a problem. And I would put blockchain a little bit in that space. I'm somewhat of a skeptic on the whole sort of, cryptocurrency world. And I see blockchain as being, unfortunately, the victim of that problem, in that it was, it's kind of got itself tied to that. But I think that's what's different about AI, or at least the way in the direction we're heading in with AI, is it's not really trying to solve a problem per se. It's trying to change the way we work and operate. It's just much more fundamental than, I see that you're having trouble with that, so let me make a more optimized way of doing it. It's just like, again, it comes back to that point you said. It's the companion side of it. It's the co-pilot, to use our terminology, nature of it. It's just an assistant, and it doesn't do anything in particular, but it can kind of do everything once you learn how to use it.
Yeah, that's amazing. There is kind of a phenomenon that we're seeing is, on one hand, it's being adopted dramatically in all kinds of fields. But on the other hand, there's areas where there's hesitancy in adopting AI. What are you seeing there? What are the different phenomenons? What are the ways people are dealing with that?
Yeah, look, you're certainly right that for all of the potential that I think many of us can see in AI, and those of us that have embraced it or experienced it or use it and play with it in a work or life basis, you can kind of get that sense of it. But there is this almost a sense of worry wrapped around this idea, with good reason as well, I think, and we should talk a bit about that good reason. But there is concern that AI, because it is so much more than just a technology or a tool that will do the same thing every time we use it, it behaves differently, it adapts, it develops, it can be to a certain degree taught to behave in certain ways, that I think there's a sense of nervousness there. Now, I'm pretty bullish broadly myself on the opportunity that AI represents. I'm generally a tech optimist. I think that there's great opportunity out there, and I'm somewhat concerned that our obsession today with this sort of fear of AI and this breeding of a fear that it's to be feared is going to inhibit that natural curiosity that we sort of all have. I mean, that's human nature is to create, to be curious, to extend themselves beyond their own capacity. It's the development of tools. That's how we've operated as a sort of over the millennia. But yeah, look, adoption is slower than where it needs to be. And I think if you take a step back, that's probably the expected position that we should be in, given that there is much to think about when we think about the risks of AI. And I know this, at Atera, you would know this consideration and then the work that we do around responsible AI. And it comes in many forms, and governments and policymakers and tech companies and tech businesses like yourself, we're all trying to think about this problem and trying to address it. And it's a combination of some technical things that we need to think better about, concepts like hallucinations and regurgitation and sort of bias in regurgitation need to be thought about in technical ways. But it also needs to be thought about in the governance process, and businesses, and I know Atera does this themselves very well, is to think about how do we operate, now we have AI in our business, making sure that we have all the right ticks and balances in our business to make sure we are addressing those risks. Because I think it's important that organizations recognize that the risk of AI adoption is probably not really in the technology and adoption of the technology. Like, the technology is not bad. It's not going to do something bad. But the governance, the processes you put in place, and ultimately the confidence of your teams and your people to take on AI is what's going to be holding us back. I think people are just, frankly, a little bit scared of what could go wrong with AI versus excited about what could go right with AI.
Yeah, I'll add that one of the things that we're experiencing in the last year and a half is the extensive work that Microsoft is doing on security and privacy. And when we talk to our customers, one of the biggest concerns is specifically that security and privacy. And we know, we at Atera know the extensive work that Microsoft is doing on that and that we're doing on our side. And I agree, there's a lot of fear here and uncertainty, but probably misplaced at this point, because we're really into this for a while. Misplaced in terms of the risk, not in terms of the feeling I can fully understand it. But yeah.
Maybe the balance is wrong, Gil. I think that's something else we see a lot of, and you would have seen from the EU and certainly in our region in Asia and around the world this focus on thinking about AI from a risk categorization point of view. So what is the risk of this position, of this particular use of AI in this particular context? I think that's a good way to think about it, because then we start to worry about the real issues and not just the sort of broad risk of, well, AI is dangerous because I don't understand it or it does these things, without putting it in context. I think that's, and security, you mentioned security, super important aspect of this in general.
On the front, there's another front that is kind of part of the adoption is training and education inside corporations or smaller companies. What is Microsoft doing in that field? What is the latest thinking? What should the Atera users be doing there for their users or their customers?
Yeah, it's a really important point, is skilling. I've used this phrase a few times in our conversation already about developing confidence in the technology. And I think this is something is an important aspect of skilling. It's, I think we kind of scare people off a bit when we say, you must become skilled in AI, because that probably leads them to think they need to become skilled in machine learning and data science and data management and IT operations and all those things that it probably isn't really about. I think you need to get confident in using AI. Now, to some degree, there are new skills, technical skills being developed. And I think the market generally and your customers, our customers, are adapting to be more adept at data management and in its relationship to AI as a service and the way that AI and data intersect. But at the same time, I think it's really humanist. It comes down to sort of more human skills that we need to really hone. And they're not always skills that the workplace readily accepts. And what I mean by that is things like experimentation, the willingness to fail, the learning from failure is not a naturally tenable position for most businesses to think about putting themselves in. But AI is very much a tool built from experimentation. You try something, it doesn't give you the results, or you prompt it again, or you try another question to get the data answer you're looking for. And so you need that experimentation, and then you need to couple that up with what can best be described as just adaptability, the willingness to change and move with it. AI is not a very static technology. It's not like you can go and buy a copy of, AI version 2 off the shelves tomorrow and it works like it does. We're seeing just iterative changes almost weekly in the capacity of this technology. So you kind of got to relearn skills a lot as you go through that process. I think from a pure skill base, those are the things that I see are leading people to get better results out of AI, because it takes them over that barrier of, I don't know how to use it, into I'm going to figure out what it can do for me. So yeah, those are the soft skills. I mean, of course, yes, technical skills, learning how to use the products and technologies, but that's, I think that's just part of the story.
There's a story that I have to tell you because it's an Australian customer of ours, and we were showing him the AI demo of the AI for the first time. And one of the powers of Atera's AI is that it's connected directly to your knowledge, your IT knowledge base that is specific to your network. So we wanted to show how it works. The answers are not general, they're very specific. And we asked it a question, and it shows that it's connecting to the knowledge base, and it didn't connect. And it answered a general question. And I saw that, and I said, there goes the demo. I mean, that's exactly what we didn't want to show. But then the person that was doing the demo just wrote, can you answer me based on the local, your data, your knowledge base, not, and then it connected. And the person that saw the demo suddenly understood you can interact with it. You can ask a question, and if it doesn't connect to the actual knowledge base, you can ask it to connect, and it'll give you, and it's a dialogue, and it's really very different than software.
That's a really good story.
It became an amazing demo instead of So
that's great. That's a really good example. I like it. Yeah, very good.
The future. What is waiting for us? Trends, breakthroughs in the next 12 months, in your opinion, and in what you're from your.
Yeah, I think if I knew, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. I'd be sitting on a tropical island somewhere as as the richest person in the world, because I know the future. But I do think I'm privileged in that I get to see a little bit of this from our side in terms of the company, and my job is at least to keep a lens on that. So there's a couple of pieces of this that I would say it's important to think about, and there's two sides of this. The first is probably where most people think about, which is in terms of the innovation, in terms of AI itself, where's that going? What are we going to see next? And I see three things as probably the predominant areas, certainly of our research, and I think broadly across the sector, you see this research going on. And this is over and above all of the work that's going on to sort of make AI more, I'll say the word safer, but what I mean by that is just more aligned to sort of expectations, reducing the risks of hallucination, making AI just more safe in certain environments. That sort of continues broadly. But the three things I see coming up that I think will transform the way we think about it. The first and most obvious one, I think you'd be familiar with as well, is the shift towards smaller language models, or SLMs, small language models. Phi 2, Phi 3, as we just released in our world, but also Meta's Llama, and a bunch of others out there. And it's a really interesting idea if you think about the fact that when GPT-3 launched, and then 3.5 and sort of 4, in that era of that period where we kind of were like just momentous leaps in size and experience, and we all kind of tied ourselves to the idea that it had to be the bigger, larger model, the more data points, the more parameters, the better it was. And we learned in a short 18 months that actually by bringing down the data to be more finessed, more nuanced data, better data, we can actually build smaller models. And that opens up a whole raft of creativity about where models may exist and how we can build discrete models for unique scenarios and use cases, models that are just deeply tuned to particular types of conversation. So I think we're going to continue to see that pathway go forward. I think we're also going to see evolutionary steps in the modality of AI experiences. Today, we can kind of, it's getting better between, say, image and language-based modalities, and we can sort of share images with ChatGPT and get it to kind of talk about it. And we've moved to video with Sora and other tools, and we continue to invest in that way. I just think that if you think about the natural humanistic experience, how do we all communicate? We communicate visually, incredibly deeply visually. Much of the information I'm consuming about our call now is visual information about your face and where you're in and everything about that. The words are sort of a small part of it. So I think we really need to think differently about, if we want AI to be the accelerant that we think it is, the modality and the way in which we interact with it and it interacts with us needs to adapt. And the last one is what I'm referring to. It's not me, I made it up, but we largely refer to as agent-based AI. So if you think about most of the AI we have today, even though they're rich experiences, they're conversational, as you just said, or very much process-led. Like we have to kind of start a mechanism that ends a mechanism, and we have to push the dialogue forward. I think we're going to see a lot more of this sort of goal-oriented AI, where we give it an objective and it navigates its pathway to that objective. Simple terms would be, an AI that says, onboard employees John Stevens to the company. And that's follows a whole series of steps that need to take place for John to be part of the company, access badges, and stuff. That's where I think we're going to go to in terms of the way that AI innovation is going to go. In terms of AI operations and kind of the governance, as it were, which is where I spend a lot of my time, I'm already starting to see chief AI officers, chief AI risk officers, chief data ethics officers. These kinds of roles appear in some organizations that have a greater risk. So I'm seeing that in financial services, in healthcare, education sectors, where the commensurate risk of AI going wrong has a much bigger impact on society. So I think it's a relevant tie-in there. And of course, with that, and it's something that I think is going to impact all of us, is AI standards and AI regulation. I would suspect by the end of this year, what are we in now, 2024, middle of the year, by the end of this year, we know the ISO 42 standard for AI management is now ratified. I suspect we'll start to see audits, and I think we'll start to see people holding others accountable to things like an ISO standard for your AI management, and governments moving towards regulation. So there's lots of fun stuff coming, agents, seamless modality, but there's also some important stuff, but less fun stuff coming, like risk officers and regulation.
It's interesting. We actually, from the get-go, year and a half now, have been working on agent-based AI. And
Awesome.
we're phrasing it in these 2 days of sessions as action AI as opposed to generative AI. And
awesome.
I really feel that, that's the world we're actually living in, is that world that you're describing. The ISO is very interesting to have, certification that you're working properly with it. That's very interesting. I'm going to jump a bit here.
Mm-hmm.
Within organizations to adopt AI, you want to have a champion. So one could be the chief AI officer. But then there's stakeholders and end users. So part of what we're doing is, for example, is targeted at IT professionals, but there's also a part that works and interacts directly with the end user on IT things. What tips and advice can you give these champions in order to increase adoption by both stakeholders and the end users that will be interacting with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I really like the idea of the way you position it, these sort of champions. I think that, we look at history has proven over every sort of phase of new technology adoption, and I say new, but like cloud technology, as that came around like in the last 10 years, that was the mechanism that most organizations we saw who were successful took, is they invested in leaders, champions, internal advocates, people that are empowered to lead the way. And I think that first thing is I would lean on is when you're building these champions roles, empower them to make changes or empower them to think differently, to think outside of the standard operating process that the business is in. You want somebody that kind of straddles the business today so they can see where the problems are and help connect with the business, but also can move outside of that box and think differently about it. And I would give them an umbrella of confidence by having at least some degree of senior leadership, governance, or ownership of the AI investment. I think one of the biggest failures we've seen in most organizations is the apportioning of AI strategy to be to the CIO or to the Office of Technology and say, okay, you need to build us an AI strategy. And they come at it with a very technology lens. Or they go to the risk and governance and say, okay, you need to manage risk for AI for us and tell us what we can't do. And then you just start from this very poor place. So, and I'm mirroring a bit about what we've done. So in Microsoft, we established the Office of Responsible AI, which is an office that drives governance, policy, education, and mechanisms for us to behave in certain ways. And then they empower the champs, the RAI champs, responsible AI champs across the business to be the leaders and advocates for that, to get out and talk to the business about it. And then the last thing I would say is, you can put all of the investments into governance and build all these champs and empower them and give them all the skills, but you kind of need to build a risk reward mechanism in the business. If your staff are going to learn AI, if you're going to empower them to go learn about use AI and bring it into the business, what's the reward for that? Like, get them into a mechanism where their learning and their development, their new skills can be immediately applied to a problem. And I think that's what those champions can start to do, is sort of start to establish these, a center of excellence, an office of creativity, a sort of experimentation zone where, they don't just learn something and then go back to their day job and forget it. They actually can then go build something that the business can see. And you create that sense of purpose about AI. And I think because the biggest risk, and it kind of goes back to the skilling conversation, is we skill people and then we don't give them any reason to adapt those skills to their work. And then they just become dead skills, or worse, they go off to somewhere else that is quite happy to pay for their new skills. So I think that's something we need to think a lot about. And it would be remiss of me, Gil, not to point out that on top of the great products that Atera builds and that you have out there built on our platform, we also have our Microsoft 365 Copilot experiences. That is a great way for many organizations to simply start to learn and use AI in what I would call a relatively safe environment.
Sure. So I'm going to take you now with a similar question, but to smaller companies. A lot of our customers are smaller businesses and MSPs, and they don't have a chief AI officer. And how should, and for them, I think it's even more critical to jump in and not expensive. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's a smaller company that has an IT department, to jump in and get the benefits of the efficiencies and competitiveness, how would that look different? Because they don't have all this infrastructure that bigger organizations have.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and you're right. And same here in Australia, a lot of most of the businesses are quite small organizations. Look, I think in some ways it's similar, but maybe we just rescope it down a bit. Like I often use the mantra of, to individuals who want to get on this path, it's use it, learn it, break it, and then leverage it. And I think if you, as individuals, as small businesses, there are so many places today where you can start to use AI for free, whether it be our Copilot, ChatGPT, or many other tools out there, or you download one and play with it yourself because you want to kind of put some safety brakes around it. But use it, learn it, and by learn it and break it, this is the engineer in me, Gil, which is the best way to figure out how something works is to break it, push it to its limits, figure out what it can't do, and then you go, okay, now I know what you can do because I know what you can't do, and then leverage it. And I guess that, kind of that mentality of just, you've got to kind of get in there and roll your sleeves up. The only thing I would couple that with, particularly for small businesses, is you've got to, essentially, you need to solve a problem with AI. I think there's a real risk, and big organizations have the sort of the latitude to do this, which is ideate and experiment and kind of look at what it might do. I think in a small business, you tend to be much closer to the bone. You know what your business is, you know where your gaps are, you know what your market is, you know what your competitive environment is, you know what you'd like to do better. Pick one of those problems and figure out how AI can, or if it can at all, fit to that problem, and just tactically solve that problem and build on that. The perfection is the enemy of progress, and nothing more so in a small business where you're not going to get it right, but just build on a small problem solve. But essentially solve a problem. Don't just fiddle around with it, because you will lose time and not build value.
Well, when I think about the Terra customers, that's actually perfect for them, because IT professionals, there's nothing more than we love than to take something and take it apart and put it back together again and experiment and see what we can get out of it. And yeah, I mean, that is, without all the big organization around it, that's amazing, actually. It's
awesome. So maybe, Gil, maybe I can turn the questions back to you, and you can share some of your thoughts, because I think you're the CEO of Atera. You're in a very enviable place that many other organizations would see themselves to want to be in, because you kind of built an AI business, and you've built a platform that is built around this AI. So you must have some learnings. Like what have you learned along the way? What have been the outcomes, the lessons you've learned, the things that have tripped you up that you can share with us?
So we actually started working on AI 9 years ago when we started the company. The company today, Atera, has 12,000 customers in 120 countries around the world. So we've done really great progress there. But 9 years ago, basically right after we started the company, we understood, or we felt that AI should be in the core of what we do. And we started developing it, and we had teams, and our first patents were from 2017, but it never hit the level that we wanted to hit until late 2022, when Microsoft came to us and gave us this early access to OpenAI. And then first thing that I saw was that it's magical. We were astonished. I mean, we were seeing it on our own thing. And the second thing we did, the first was, okay, we're all in. This was a year and a half ago. The second thing we did is we started bringing in AI to the whole company. So Copilot and GitHub Copilot, and there were challenges there. I mean, there's areas that in creative department, everywhere actually, we're using AI now extensively. But in every one of these groups, there were challenges. There were objections. There was feelings that wouldn't be good enough. People were a bit concerned, scared for their job, etc. Nobody lost their job here because of AI. The contrary, they're doing more and more interesting things and better things. In this year and a half journey also on developing Atera, combined with Azure OpenAI, we've created something that for us is like what we've been dreaming of for 10 years now, 10 years now. It's amazing. And the sense of not software that I can say, ask a question, and then it'll give me an answer. And I say, well, do you mind checking our own knowledge base? It'll check and it'll give you a more accurate, and it's almost hard to explain. My kids actually ask me, what is this AI you're doing? And, don't take this literally, but I thought, how am I going to explain this whole thing? I said, imagine that a spaceship landed in our yard and sorry about that, I'm ruining and some people came out and said, hey, we're here to help. And we started working with them. It's such an amazing experience. And, I hope that everybody will at least hear what we've been doing with it at Atera and every department, not only in IT, and experience it as well.
Well, I'm going to have to pick you up on a couple of things, Gil. The spaceship, sure, for one, but you use the phrase magic, and it's a bit like magic, and so thinking about the magic that it is, and therefore the kind of the magic you can do with it, and if I can use the metaphor, when the Atera spaceship lands in a customer environment and the magic walks out of the door, what's unique about that? Like, what do you guys bring to the table? How have you made AI such an integrated part of your service offerings?
So our goal was to have something that will take away on both sides of a ticket in IT, things that are mundane and repetitive and a grind, and you don't want to do them. And the goal was that AI will understand the data and through that understand the problem and understand the solution and solve it. So in essence, IT people won't have to reset passwords anymore, take care of printer issues, or why my computer is slow today, all these things. And what we've been able to do is combine large language models, a lot of proprietary data of Atera, specific data of the network and the customer that is secure and private because it's using Azure OpenAI, which is secure and private, and all that combined with our sensors, which is one of the strongest parts of Atera. We have sensors in the network, outside of the network, in the cloud. All these sensors bring the AI information that then it can really accurately diagnose the problem and solve it. So that's actually the architecture that we built, and which is very unique. Some of it has patents from 2017 already. We were thinking of that then. The AI wasn't good enough. And it's magical. You can see somebody trying to have a printer problem, and it'll identify it before he understands why it's not. And it'll say to him, look, let me solve this for you. And it'll solve it for him. And you don't
and it's no, sorry, you said a magical phrase there. You said solves the problem, and I think back to our conversation just short earlier, that's the thing. It solves, when you can get it to solve a problem, that's magical. That kind of has a real big impact. So no, please carry on.
I was going to say that the impact this magic has, if you look at an employee, both sides of the ticket, the IT professional and the user, IT problems, there's the efficiency issue and the productivity, and, you can calculate the dollars, which is also amazing. But there's also this frustration you get from IT problems, the frustration that is actually a lot of times translated to the company itself, and employee churn and dissatisfaction, and all that also goes away. And so it's like, we did some surveys now, and one of the surveys we did, 80% of respondents said that they are sure, these are IT professionals, that if AI will take away these tier one, mundane, repetitive work, they will be more satisfied this is the answer, they will be more satisfied in their work and happier people.
I think if they could be your two goals, happy people and satisfied people, that's a good thing.
We should have a tagline that we make people happy.
I think I want to steal that one from you. I think that's too good a tagline now. That I want to hold that one down. I'm going
Yeah.
to patent that while we're not
Well,
talking.
we're talking.
Look, yeah, I'm going to write it down. But this is awesome. This is great to hear it. And I think that this is about you, but in many ways, it's about the partnership. And I think that partnership that is something for us as a company is critical. We see our success is through the eyes of our partners like Atera, who take our technology and solve problems, as you just described. How do you see that kind of, if looking forward, how do you see those kinds of partnerships growing and kind of driving innovation and I guess dealing with some of the challenges we've talked about as well around AI adoption?
So because everything is so new and we're on such a cutting edge here, partnerships here are very important. And we
Mm.
work, we have our experience of working with Microsoft on top of Azure OpenAI, and we literally meet weekly with Microsoft technical teams that we share ideas and experiences, that we hone in on security and privacy, that we learn from each other on our experience as on adoption and training. So I think that if you want to really adopt and enjoy the benefits of AI, partnership is critical. Microsoft is a key partner here for us, an amazing partner. We also get feedback that the dialogue on both sides, because we're experiencing different markets, different things than Microsoft are doing today, and both of us are running ahead as fast as we can, and on this amazing cutting edge. So partnerships are critical. Maybe Lee, there's something to let the audience know about how to partner with Microsoft if they want to do all kinds of things with regard to AI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it's a hard question to answer on a global scale in terms of where you can do this because we operate, in so many different ways. But fundamentally, our business is built on enabling others to build great things in our technology and in the cloud. That's the premise of why we exist as a company, is to make companies like Atera and others grow and flourish on that cloud services. I would suggest to anyone that's keen to do that, the easiest thing you can do is sign up to use the services for free anyway and begin just your journey of experimentation. As you want to get into more complex technologies, then connect with Microsoft. We have a whole range of programs, whether it be the Founders Hub for small scale startups, whether it be the Digital Natives program for sort of born in the cloud new businesses, or whether it's kind of more traditional business partnerships where we can work with you and invest in your business to make sure we both grow together. So I would just say reach out, but in terms of where you reach out to, that's going to depend a lot on where the audience is listening in from.
Great. We're coming to the end of the session, regrettably.
Yeah. Yes.
Just reflecting a bit on what we talked about and what you're seeing. What's good? Where the near term? Should I jump? If I'm an Atera listener to this session, should I jump all into AI? What's going to happen? Is it going to be amazing? What's your reflection on all this?
Well, the very short answer to your question is yes. Jump in, learn, develop skills, figure it out. Figure out if you even like it or don't like it, but don't just sit there and assume you don't like it because you've never used it. But more broadly, Gil, I'm going to go back a little bit in history. In the 80s, I was a kid, like I was enthralled by computers at that time. And my dad, who was running his own business, was kind of being forced to use computers just to stay ahead of the game. For him, they were this necessary evil, this burden of process that he must invest in. And now I find myself at the same age as my dad was then, looking back and have this technology. And all I can do is be excited about the fact that in 40 years' time, look at how the world has changed because of those computers I was enthralled with when I was a kid. So in 40 years' time, what is the world that my kids are going to be enthralled with? Why wouldn't you want to be jumping in today and learning to be a part of that rather than sitting back and going, it's too hard? Dive in, learn, play, experiment. Nothing will go wrong, but a lot could go right.
It's amazing. Lee, thank you very much for your time. Now that
Pleasure.
you're going out for a beer in Australia, save one for me, please.
I will do.
And talk to you soon.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks for the time.
Bye bye now.